Welcome, everyone. And here we are today to listen to a session about conflict, money personality, and the clash of values presented by Jacinta Gallant. Jacinta, as many of you may know, is a well-renowned and respected collaborative lawyer, conflict trainer, innovator, mediator, and has done training and brought innovation to the work that we do across Canada and beyond. So without further ado, I'm going to let Jacinta take over. Thank you.
One of the challenges, that would suggest that one of the challenges in doing your job is when that isn't present, when there isn't a sense of a common goal to help this couple move forward. And you mentioned as well that sometimes you work with teams. Yeah, would I have that right?
Yes.
Okay. So that sometimes that lack of coordination or commonality is even within the professionals who are working on the case.
On the team, yes. Yeah, so just having a common interest, common goal, what's in the best interest of the client. So yeah, when that's not present, I feel it gets in the way of me doing the best work that I can.
Yeah, and so when that isn't present, it's hard to get the job done.
Yeah.
And when you're working in the CDFS space, the divorce financial specialist space, what do you see as your job? Like, what is it? Is it?
Yeah. So as a neutral, financial neutral, I see my job to really understand the client's goals.
Yep.
And as it relates to anything financial that helps them to meet those goals, it's my job in helping to unravel all of that.
So your job is to help clients make good decisions to reach their goals. And ultimately,
Yes.
Would you see it's your job to help them find a way to make that an agreement?
When it comes to the financial goals, yes.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah.
So let's talk about human behaviors then. So a couple of examples, Blair, you offered the problem, my goodness, the problem of getting the frickin' financial information. And I can tell you as a lawyer, I love it when you guys are involved because that's like, yeah, I know, I feel ya. Yay, you're taking care of that. So it's a huge relief to me as a lawyer when I know our financial specialists are the ones gathering the information and ensuring that clients understand it. So Debbie's offering something, a barrier. Yeah. Oh my gosh, let's talk about fair. I'm going to bring that into the equation. Okay. So the other challenge is when the clients are debating or don't conceive that the same outcome would be fair to me, what's fair to you. And so dealing with the fairness debate, would that be another thing that shows up in a CDFS office? The fairness debate? Yeah.
Yes, although I don't think it's just always fairness. It's keeping in mind that the financials are quite often, especially in collaborative cases, are neutral, whereas the lawyers' roles are advocates for their clients. And so whether or not it's fair, the lawyer on one side may be biasing, pushing.
Oh, I know, but fairness.
But ultimately, it's fairness that should be the goal.
Well, yeah, except, can we just be honest here? What's fair to you is different from what's fair to me. The law doesn't often help us. And for God's sake, sometimes the financial information, as objectively interpreted and presented, doesn't offer a solution either. But, we're getting to a common theme here, which is the thing that I've begun noticing starting about 10 years ago to try and understand resistance. What is it that's preventing these clients who have asked for our help? Usually, we're not working with a couple unless they've said, hey, will you help us? And then they behave in ways that get in the way of our offering the help. I call it the problem with problem solving. So that sometimes the very fact that we have a job to do that they've asked us to do, the barriers to our doing the job tend to be the people, like them, their perspectives, their stories, their emotions, their fears, their sense of threat, their defensiveness, their hopes and their goals, which might be very positive, but might be, in terms of achieving an outcome, might be challenging to meet. And so lawyers and financials share sometimes the challenge in that, there's this push-pull of inviting clients to explore who they are and what they can be in their future, with the reality check of, and sometimes in our minds, we're like, well, that ain't going to happen. And so this finding this way to be with the other human beings who are the clients in a way that enhances their ability to be at their best and highest self, to make the decisions that they need to make. And that's why when Linda and I were talking about this webinar, I'm like, you guys are just like us, the lawyers, in that we're dealing with human beings, and those human beings have stories and strong emotions, and often deeply held and legitimate feelings of betrayal, loss, grief, emotional stuff that in the collaborative space, we'll often say, oh, that's for the coach to handle, or the mental health professional, or the family professional to handle. But I want to talk to you guys. Do you not see emotions showing up in your room when clients meet with you? Or are they always well behaved?
So I think one of the problems is that money is a very emotional piece in anyone's life. And depending on what their background is, they will have some preconceived ideas about what the value of money is, if it has a self-worth perspective, and whether somebody's, a spender or a saver, and sometimes they aren't in the, that isn't working within the relationship. And so there's a lot of blame. And so it's a huge emotional trigger, really.
So it's interesting because, of course, the financial reality, the legal reality, the emotional reality for our clients is always present. And sometimes they are at a higher level of evolution and preparedness for making decisions. And often they're not, because would you agree that our system generally, and by system, I don't just mean the court system, but the whole idea of the way people divorce, that it is very time insensitive, right? It imposes timelines on people that they're not often emotionally ready yet to meet. That a big piece of the challenge that I've experienced I'm just trying to help, in doing my job is usually fueled by an emotional reaction to something. And so I want to invite those of you who are interested in conflict generally to consider looking at even what is at the core of someone defending and feeling, when someone feels threatened at the core of their identity, sometimes just because of the divorce, or threatened as, how can I possibly be a good parent and agree to this? Or threatened by, how can I honor the commitment I made to this person when all I've got left is money, right? Like all of these values and emotions are tied together. And within the separation and divorce space, we've primarily been left with a negotiating model that, while better than positional bargaining or having a judge decide, does say, hey, separate the people from the problem, focus on, mutual gain, expand the notion of what's possible, and help clients identify why they want something or why they're demanding for something. And the challenge with it, and I love this one, use an objective criteria to make choices. Okay. So if we were doing a longer session on our negotiating model, and I would debunk it and say, the biggest challenge we have in our work is that we were applying a problem-solving model, the interest-based approach, which is way better than positional bargaining, as I've said, or having a judge decide, but it doesn't account for these strong emotional reactions that people have that go to the core of their values and their identity, of how they want to be treated, how they think someone who respects them would treat them, and that we can really not separate the people from the problem. How many of you would agree that the people often are the problem? Can I get an amen on that one? Right?
People can be difficult.
And people can be difficult. I can be difficult, right? When I'm not getting my needs met. And I'm going to be even more difficult when it's a need at that core level of how I want to be perceived and treated in the world, or how I can or can't live my fullest life. So when we consider the training that financial professionals and lawyers get around human behavior and managing emotion, it didn't come with our initial training. And many of us have spent some time really trying to get a better understanding of how to interact with people who are stressed out, who are really like feeling very threatened, that they're even at the core of their identity going from couple to separate. Those identity threats can be huge. Add to that an affair, a betrayal, you promised me, or I sacrificed, or you don't deserve it, you're not worthy. We're basically entering a world where what the heck were we thinking choosing to do this work? So what I want to talk about today is how I have figured out the little pieces that I've figured out to bring values in. Because how many of you were trained? You can't negotiate values, so, let's not talk about it. Certainly in the negotiating model, we have that. I can't see if anyone else is nodding. So this whole idea that you can't negotiate values, so we often don't bring them into the room. Talking about money personality, which you guys all know about. But I just want to explain how I come about preparing the clients to consider their differences, and also looking at the whole question of conflict style, right? And so it isn't only for the coach, mediator, mental health professional to be managing the conflict dynamic that happens between the partners. It actually happens in your room and in my room. It happens all the time. And so I just want to share that. Hey, Bettina, do you have a question or a comment?
I would have a comment.
Yeah.
If that's, I was too slow. I couldn't find the raise hand button. I think, yes, they bring their emotions into the room, but we are the professionals, right? We are not attached to what is coming into the room. So I think it is like a doctor. He can't, if he tells someone, well, you're going to die tomorrow, he can't start to cry with the patient. I mean, he can, but it
yeah, like that's an excellent. Patient.
So it doesn't help if I'm emotional with them, right? So I gotta detach myself. So I find that makes it for us manageable. Otherwise, we are in the wrong profession somehow. And I know that what you said last, well, you don't deserve that and this and that. It's about the past, right? I'm a big believer in shifting the focus onto the future, and letting the things in the past, because it doesn't help. And values are negotiable. I think each value, other than if it's on a bank statement, I can always...
Oh, sorry. I mean the term values like integrity and honesty, and I don't mean the value of items.
Okay. I thought because we talked money.
Yeah.
Okay.
But that's a good point. So what I want you to think about...
The couple has always option how they arrive at a value, right? There are options.
That's not what I'm talking about.
Okay,
what
sorry.
I'm talking about, and Bettina, you missed the introduction, the behaviors that get in the way of our doing our job. So we're not talking about those moments where clients are ready and able to hear the information, make decisions, and we can, and they'll follow some direction and let us sort of steer them forward, right? This is talking about the clash. And so in every room where the couple might be working with a financial or legal or mental health professional, I'm talking about the moments where we are faced with the challenge of resistant behavior, defending someone reacting from a sense of threat, and that those behaviors get in the way of our moving, interrupting, justifying, finger pointing, blaming, coming around again, hearing the same, repeating, same. You said that yesterday. You said that last week. We're hearing it again. So the behaviors I'm talking about are the behaviors that our clients, and by the way, we also as human beings display, that get in the way of productive dialogue, or that get in the way of our being able to make sure the clients understand the information so they can make decisions. Okay, that's what we're talking about. So it's the clash of values, it's the differences in money personality, and it's the conflict dynamic that we're talking about today. So think for a minute, though, back to Bettina's point, think for a minute of some cases that you've had where the clients were ready. Sure, they felt strongly emotional, but they were like, they're ready. What's that like? How is that different from moments where you're like going out of the room thinking, oh my God, send them to the coach to get reasonable. I'm talking about the times that we do meet the human who is not managing well. Okay? And my point about values and conflict style and money personality is that I want to invite you as financial divorce specialists to think about how you ask questions, okay? Because we have an educational role, right? Both professions, we have a role of educating. We gather information, we organize it, we explain it, and our job is to make sure the clients understand it so that they can make good decisions. Would everyone agree that that's basically the piece? So what I've learned is that when I ask early and often about who each client is on those areas of values, money personality, and conflict style, it leads to a discussion that helps me understand the clients better because it causes them to pause and engage their thinking brain with their heart. Okay? So it's not a slick trick. This is just basic human asking. And so I want to give you, I'm just going to give you an example. So if I say to you, do you like breakfast? Do you like breakfast? Someone answer. Yeah.
It's okay.
What did you have for breakfast?
Nothing. Not today. I can skip it.
Okay. So do you see, I've got some information. Wes thinks breakfast is just okay, and he doesn't always eat it. So that's helpful if I'm hosting Wes and he's staying at my house and I want to know what to get at the grocery store. Okay. So when we as lawyers, because we're the same, are looking for information from clients, we might ask questions that will get us the information we need, but won't get us the stories or the emotional content that the client's desperate to put out there. Okay. And I know we're not social workers and we didn't go to grad school to become mental health professionals. So another way to ask is to say, what do you love about breakfast? So where does your thinking go when I ask you, what do you love about breakfast?
Sort of a favorite breakfast that you might have had.
Yeah, like you go to a memory, a story. Mm-hmm. So you're doing way more than giving me information. And all I did was change the way the question, and I changed my tone a little because I really want to get you to consider something more than just what should I get at the grocery store? Because I'm not looking for, sometimes I want information. So I'm going to ask a question that's very related to getting information. But I'm also really wanting to know, who are you? How do you show up in this sort of dynamic with your partner that you're now separating from, so that I can say, how can I help? How can I help so that you're able to express yourself in a way that you need to, so that you two can make some decisions together? And so one of the things that I'd love to take some time to do right now, though we won't have time to do it all, I put in the chat box a link to a website. I'd love you to go there, and we'll just spend 5 minutes. You'll have to do it very quickly, doing the card sort on the values. So if you follow that link, it'll take you to this page. And then you're going to move, you're going to put, this is the keep pile. This is the not so important. So this is more important. This is less important. And so if you do the exercise, and if you don't finish it, don't worry about it. But I want you to do the exercise. And then as you go through it, know that the end game for this exercise is narrowing from the keep pile down to 5. You only get to choose 5 as your most important values. So I'll just give you 5 minutes on the timer. Do the exercise, go as far as you can. And there's no right or wrong answer here. Oh, Debbie, did it load for you yet?
No, but I'm using my work computer, so it could be something in the firewall. So I'm just trying something on my personal computer.
Okay, great. L. Huffman, just do the exercise. You don't need to do anything more than that right now. And at the end of the 5 minutes, we'll have a group chat about it. You don't have to reveal anything. So you have 2 minutes left, so don't feel that you need to rush. If you get to the point where you're narrowing and choosing, take the time to do that. Okay. So you might not have finished the task, but I posted in the chat, I created a values exercise. When I say I created it, I created one to use with my clients based on this book. Now I've put it in the chat. So Judith Stern Peck is a social worker in New York. She wrote this book many years ago. Some of you, I think, already have it. It's called Money and Meaning. And I put her name and the title in the chat. So she is a family therapist who discovered that even family therapists were uncomfortable talking with clients about money, right? No surprise. I'm sure you see clients all the time who've even been through therapy who still can't talk about money. Yeah, I just the occasional, yeah. So, or does that not happen? Do you guys always have clients who are really comfortable talking about money? No. Right. And so it gets at it. What the values exercise does is it's not intended so that Blair can reveal to me the 5 core values he narrowed down to. So what I want you to think about instead is, so you've done this exercise. Some of you got finished, some of you didn't, and you can see now. And in fact, for an online version, I like the way that one works. We use in my practice, we use actual cards. We give the clients cards so they're physically doing a sort, and it does have that neurological cognitive benefit of you're actually doing something. But we went searching for all kinds of online options for when we're not, mailing people things. And I think that one's pretty good. Plus, I like the color blue. Nonetheless, whatever else that online source is doing, I wanted you to just know that my focus when I'm working with values is we actually narrow to 4, but that exercise is 5. And then I ask, hey, what was it like doing that exercise? So, Linda, what was it like to do that exercise?
I found it really challenging because there was a lot more that I didn't want to let go of because they were important to me too. And I mean, some of them kind of seem the same. So which one is really the one that's more important?
Yeah. So you did some thinking too about, if I have to narrow, I'll choose this one because it kind of includes that too.
Yeah.
Yeah. And what's fun is with the physical cards, you see people explaining all the time, well, this one really included this one, and they're physically doing it. So was there any comfort for you in knowing that those other important ones were still on the board?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, once you got down to 5, it felt more uncomfortable, but nevertheless, yeah. And you're kind of like, well, I know that they sort of are there in a way.
Yeah, and so when I'm working with clients around values, I'm asking, hey, what was it like to do that? Or was it hard to narrow? And they'll often say, oh my God, it was so hard. And they'll give an answer very much like Linda's. And then the next question I'll ask is, so when you were making the choices, did any stories come up for you that would explain the choice? And so often clients will say, well, yeah, I mean, when I was thinking about this one, I immediately went back to when my father came home from work one day and said he was fired. And it was during a recession. And then they're telling a story about who they are. And that the story illuminates the value choice. And so in Judith Stern Peck's book, she gives lots of examples of that the value in doing the exercise with couples is the way they describe their choice, and that it will illuminate who they are a lot more, and they'll typically tell stories. And that by doing it that way, the other person, if they're in the room, because I do this individually, but I also do it sometimes when they're together, it's the explanation, not the justification, right? Well, this is why I chose that one. And you'll find that because the exercise itself affects our brains and our hearts, because values are our soul and our brains making choices, that very exercise can be something that will de-escalate, that will calm, and that will harness the client's ability to learn something new about themselves. And when people learn something new about themselves, it's transformative. And when they do that and they're working with us, then They're just going to be better able to make informed decisions. And so that eventually I will say, hey, well, what did you choose in the end? Okay. And then they, often will bring the cards and they've got the 4 at the top. Now, not every client or clients, because sometimes I'm a lawyer, sometimes I'm a mediator, have the values may not be showing up at all in their financial decision-making, right? Or it might. And so in my work, I ask them to do the values card sort before they begin looking at parenting plans, but also before they begin looking at the financial decision-making, okay? And then I ask them to consider what values they'd like to see guiding them in their decision-making, and it's okay if they're different. It's okay if, Linda's got her list and Blair's got his list. And so I don't force the mutualization of values, and they don't have to give any up. But I can tell you that one spouse, you know how easy it is to work out those spousal support deals, right? So I'll just tell you about a moment I was the mediator, and they were negotiating. They were at the stage of exchanging proposals, and they couldn't agree. And this was one of those cases where it was the husband that was looking for spousal support from the wife, and you know how well that goes. And so she was the higher income earner, and he owned a business, and his business never had to be profitable because she had enough income, and his was, in her mind, a hobby. And basically, her perspective was basically get a job or make it profitable. I'm not paying you spousal support type. So we had gone through a lot, and in the proposals, he wanted 5 years and fairly high, and she was proposing 2 years and fairly low. Okay. And so all I did was hunch, because they, of course, remember, I have them do the exercise on their own, right? I have them do the exercise. They're not spending time paying me while they sort through values. But I know they've done the exercise because we've met individually, and I've asked them things like, what was it like to narrow? And so we've got a little bit of a story going, but I don't remember or care what the 4 were that they chose. But in this case, since they were apart, they were polarized, 5 years high, 2 years low, I said, hey, I wonder if this has anything to do with your values. And then they stopped their argument for a minute. They looked up, and I said, well, yeah, get your cards out. And they had them. So they laid their 4 cards down, and I just shut up, which is hard for me, but I'm getting better. And then they looked at each other's cards, and they noticed that 2 were the same and 2 were different. And I shut up, and they were discovering this and noticing this. And then I said, does anything about this help you guys now? Something like that. And soon after, the husband picked up the card that said self-improvement. And he said, and he held it up and he showed the card. That's not what this card is. And he held the card and he showed it to her. And he said, you know what? This card helps me decide. I hear what you're saying, that the business hasn't been profitable. I really think I can make it profitable. And I'm committed to doing that because I believe in self-improvement. Would you go to 3 years? She said yes. So they went 3 years, moderate, done. Yay. I basically did nothing but identify with them. And it was a hunch that it might have been values. Of course, there was enough content to their story, right? She resented that he didn't bother to make a profit. There was a whole storyline about sacrifice and who deserved what. And she worked hard, but was also in her mind the primary parent. All those stories were evident and present in this case. It's just that when it came to decision making and they were polarized, when I asked about values, that's what solved it. So there's an example to encourage you to don't discount the value of having people explore their own values, but have them do it on their own time, right? I don't ask them to do the card sort while they're paying me to be in the room. Okay, hopefully that was illuminating. Next thing I want to talk about is conflict style. And again, you probably know of this resource, but I want you to, if you don't, just wait, I'll paste it into the browser or into the chat. That I also send, clients use a workbook in my practice. They do the work with, just a sec, stop the share. They do this work with me through a workbook, but in this case, you could have clients go to the River House Press and have a look at what conflict style even means. And so for me, part of my work with each client, because I'll always meet with them individually, will be to understand, what do you like? Because I'm very focused on behavior, not how do you feel when conflict is rising or when you guys are arguing about something and it really matters. I say, how do you act? What do you do? Because I find that when you ask clients about their behaviors, it helps us then get the cue, the clue and the cue to when that is showing up. And so clients will often say, I avoid, I compromise, I accommodate, I fight to be right, those kinds of things. And so having the chance for them to reflect before they're in the room together or before they're having to make decisions about compromise, meeting in the middle, accommodating. If we know they're both avoiders, we know that they might fight really nicely and we won't really know what's really at the heart of it. If they identify as both being fight to be right, we know there's going to be this going on. And that part of our job will be to help them express themselves more productively. And so I'm going to just show you again, I hope the link showed up in the chat, that this is a good resource, okay? And you can do we buy an individual, we buy a number of inventories, so I think it's $15 each. And when I'm giving training on conflict style, I'll have our participants go and do their conflict style inventory beforehand. But in the book that I use, I would ask it around the way we ask about introvert, extrovert, and ask about behaviors. When I have to talk about difficult things with my former partner, I tend to behave in this way. And so it focuses on behavior and interpretation rather than how you feel about it, and that's not to wash away the emotion, but to be more practical. And then to say when emotions are strong or I feel a conflict rising up, I tend to, and they pick a box. My former partner tends to pick a box. And so then the conversation with me is, all right, well, if you tend to accommodate or compromise, if that's your default, then it's going to be important for me to support you to really do some clear thinking about what you need and hope for, rather than just caving in, right? Or equally, if you're someone who fights to be right, I might say, how does that go in your experience with dealing with Blair? And they'll give an example of a fight. How effective is it? Okay, so in this process where you're making decisions about your future, it'll be important for me to notice that when she starts to fight to be right, you tend to shrink and you want to leave the room. So my way of helping is to help you both be productive. And so having that information as I'm working with the couple is invaluable. I used to wait to just discover it because they'd be in the room together and I'm like, oh, there they go. I'm observing. He's an extrovert thinking out loud. He's an introvert, obviously wanting some time to process. And then I would hunch that and I'd guess that and I might throw an educational piece out. Instead, I ask right up front, how do you show up? How do you behave when there's difficult conversations to be had? And because they can reflect on it on their own time, they're more prepared to, what am I thinking? They're more prepared to answer my questions initially as how I can help. So we're not just generally speaking, how can I help? It's very specific. And it normalizes that lots of people aren't that great with conflict, or they are different with their spouse than they are at work. So it's illuminating the stories that our clients tell as they discover something about themselves. Okay, and that's what I wanted to talk about with conflict styles. So the River House Press is an excellent resource for you if you want to learn more about conflict style, but also where you can go in and you can have the clients go and pay individually, or you can buy a group thing like I do, and you just give them a code and they can go in and do the conflict style inventory, which includes a bit of education as well as questions that will lead them to their inventory. Okay. Any questions about, so we've talked about values. I've given you the reference to the book that I think you'd find, even though it's written for therapists, I found it really, really compelling. And some of the financial professionals that I know who have read it have said, yeah, it really helped. Okay. And it explains how bringing values together, asking about them in a way that's not about what are your values, and then exploring how it fits with how they make decisions is a very important thing. And I swear, I think that for financial planning and CDFS work, that it's got to be a big part of your day job is watching people make decisions where values are informing those decisions, but they're not transparent. They're not revealed, and the clients haven't probably even thought about them. So I find myself asking a lot more things like, what are the values you would like to see guiding you? Okay. And if they hadn't done the card sort, they would be like, what the hell are you talking about? Right? So I want you to know that I acknowledge that there's this disconnect if we ask clients about these things and they haven't been prepared for it. They're just like, you're my financial person. Why do we have to talk about that? So the third piece on the theme of this get together was money personality. And so this is where you all are ahead of me, I'm sure, understanding the whys and the hows about people's decision-making around money. So I learned from financial professionals about how that shows up. And I began to really see the value in bringing together the values and the way people make decisions with questions that focus on the money side. None of this will be profound for you, but I do want to show you how I ask the questions so the clients can discover something about themselves before we have to meet, and talk about it. So, this is what I do is I ask the clients to go back to the card sort, and I'll say, like, you might find that you're choosing different values now that we're focused on money. Okay. And so I want the clients to go back to the choice of core values and change them if they're ready for something that is focused on money. And I also want them to look at how they make decisions, because if you read Judith Sternpeck's book, the exercises go hand in hand. So this shows me that I'm asking about the core values because we've already had a discussion about them. So in this exercise, it's more like, what are they? And did they change because of money? And then which describes you in relation to money? Now, you all may have even better descriptors, but this is the basic difference, the way I see people in my practice, the way they show up. And often people will pick two of these, maybe three. But again, it's the exercise itself that is the value from my perspective, because the clients wake up to, because I also ask, how would you describe your former partner? Right? And so I had a case where it was a younger couple. They were in a big fight around their 2-year-old. And when I asked them, and one was a financial planner, an investment person too, and the other worked in a bank. So they were both working in the money industry. And so I had no idea what was going to be their clash or what was going to be their big thing. I just knew that they were in a bad space around what the parenting plan would be. So when I asked them to do these exercises before I met with them individually, I then met with the husband, the dad. And when I asked him sort of like, what was it like to do the exercises? And, what did you learn? He said, oh my God, I figured out why we fight about money. And I'm like, whoa, what? Because of course I don't know very much yet. I don't know they fight about money even. I met with him before I met with her. And he was so insightful. He said, oh, I did that money personality exercise. I know I wasn't supposed to do it for today, but I went ahead and I wanted to do it. And he said, I realize that when we fight about money, I always pat her on the head and say, you know what, stop worrying, it'll be fine. But when I really reflected on it, she's always been worried about money. She came from a very poor environment, and there was never enough money. And he came to this insight that when he said, oh, don't worry, it'll be fine, he was basically dismissing her concerns completely. And I'm like, wow. Okay, so those are the types of things that I find show up. So then you ask them to think about a recent financial decision that you had to make together. So this is, again, the exercise that's really nicely described in this book. Did the discussion that you had to make this decision bring up any questions about values? And if so, what values? And then how did you make the decision? What process did you use? Did you consult? Did you go with your intuition? Did everyone have an equal say? I haven't talked to you about the decision-making part of the exercise. And then we go on to as you're preparing for difficult money conversations, how do you tend to behave or respond when you guys are disagreeing about money? And how does your former partner tend to behave or respond? Again, you'll notice that I'm asking about behaviors, not how do you feel? And then in approaching the decisions you're going to make together, what do you see as your different attitudes or beliefs about spending? And what do you see as your similar attitudes or beliefs about spending? And the magic in the questions is that they're reflecting before they engage with one another, and in my process, before they engage with me, so that if I ask about money stuff, they have learned something about themselves that they are able to then share with me, that if nothing else, and I'm going to say it's never just this, helps me be better prepared for the conversations I'm going to help them have together. And it's all in the way of asking. And so I might say, hey, with that money personality checklist, what was it like to have to make a choice rather than how did you show up? Because they're always going to reveal how they show up. But you might have someone say, oh, I couldn't believe the anxiety I felt just doing that, because you wouldn't believe how stressful money conversations were in my family. And they're suddenly telling you the story about kitchen table arguments. So all of this stuff that I'm imagining also happens in your room because you're dealing with money. And so thank you, Blair and Patricia and Linda, for letting me see your face, because I really would now love to just hear from you all. I've offered three themes that all come around how do we engage with our clients in a way that's productive and curious, that will help them learn something about themselves so that they can be more effective making decisions as we help them. And so thoughts or questions?
Yeah, I'm going to pipe in here, and at the risk of making myself a little vulnerable here. I have to say, I think this is great. I wish I was more comfortable incorporating this in my work.
Yeah.
And you had made a comment briefly, and you had said, well, you're just the financial person. What are you talking about about this for? And so when I'm working with clients, I have this in the back of my mind when I'm helping them. But haven't incorporated in my practice comfortably in actually bringing it forward to the table. So I do it in the background, but I don't put it on the table right out for them to see in black and white. Yeah. You know what I mean?
Oh, look, I so appreciate you saying that, because I suspect you're not the only person, Patricia. And I don't want to be like, go, hell yeah, lawyers too, but I want to say, hell yeah, lawyers too, right? So let me just encourage you to say that if your desire is to truly work with couples who can make a healthy shift, and if this is something that you want to bring to your practice, then getting comfortable with the conversations is probably a mix of training and practice. Okay, I just want to offer that. And we're seeing more and more people in the financial side of things taking some of the training that I'm giving around insight. And so I'm not trying to sell my training here, but I want you to know that what happens with so many of us is we think that the clients will resist us if we're trying to take them somewhere they don't want to go. And that their expectation of what a lawyer or a financial professional is going to talk to them about is usually not something like this. Would I get that right?
Yeah.
The three heads that can nod or not.
Yeah. I agree.
Yeah. And so what I want to say is it's why I created my resources, because I wanted my clients to be better prepared for what they would experience working with me. And I had a client last week who would have been one of the most reserved, buttoned up, and emotionally fragile men, right, that I've worked with in a while. And he said to me after we started gently and carefully and all of that. But what I want to get to is the mid part of our hour-and-a-half meeting where he said, because then I said, so did you get a chance to do those exercises? And he said, yeah. And I said, what was that like for you? I just kept it very open. And he said, well, I'm sure glad you gave that to me, because I was really nervous about coming here and I didn't really know what to expect. He said, yeah, that really helped. And I'm like, can I get a recording? Because he was someone I wasn't sure I was going to ask if he'd done the exercises, because I really wasn't sure, so when I asked, and then he later said, if you hadn't asked me these questions, I would never have told you. Okay. Now he has to make some really tough decisions on parenting and money. There's some tough decisions to be made. And he has a sense now that I at least understand him at a level where I'll be more aware if he's tending towards his default avoidance, and you decide. And that was extremely practical. Okay. And meaningful. And so Patricia, I don't find that people see this as touchy-feely. I find that they see this as practical. How am I going to make decisions with this person who's now leaving me? And so I'd invite you to, to just explore the whole nature of resistance. Where we think someone's going to resist us, a lot of it is our own stuff. The other thing I'll say very quickly is that what clients expect from you will depend very much on how they engage with you, from hello, from your website, from your office, from your phone call. And I always have a phone call with the client first, 10 minutes, just like a bit of a jerk test, because I don't want to book an appointment with the client if they're really not interested in working the way I do. And the other way that we work in my firm is we just say to everyone gets a workbook. It's the way we work. Do it or don't do it. They always do it. Do it or don't do it. And we don't even say do it or don't do it, but I want you to know that we just don't give the choice anymore, not so much to take away client choice, but after 3 years, I've noticed how effective it is, that they actually do the work. They engage and they come prepared to answer questions like, what did you learn about yourself? What did you learn about the pattern that you and your ex get into? What are you worried about as we approach the upcoming sessions? And how can I help? So if you're working with both clients in the room, and some of you probably aren't, but if you are, please know that it's even more vital that they're prepared beyond facts and figures. And I'll say as a lawyer, beyond facts and figures in the law, because, they're parking in your parking lot if it's an in-person, or they're going to the Zoom meeting. They might have just heard the saddest breakup song on the phone, on the radio as they were coming in. Like we just have no control over the emotions of the person who's showing up in the moment that we're meeting them. And so I do think that lawyers, and I think that CDFSs are a special breed. I mean, I know some of you are very numbers and resources and focused on being so helpful in that way, but you wouldn't choose to work with divorcing couples if you didn't get the emotional side. So I say the same about family lawyers who choose to do this in a mediation or collaborative way. So, you don't have to go to grad school and do your mental health program. If you want to know about the resources I've created, get in touch. If you want to create your own, this book could really, really help. And if you do more asking and less telling in the early part of your engagement with your client, then they're going to be more receptive to your telling when you're educating. And I've just learned that learning is transformative. I've been studying the insight approach to conflict for 5 years now. And when clients discover something new about themselves, it's exhilarating. And so I've had clients say, that was a breath of fresh air, or Wow, I'm sure glad you asked those questions. Or, oh my God, I never saw myself in any of this until now. And as long as I keep getting that kind of feedback from clients, I'm just going to keep doing what I'm doing. But I won't pretend that it wouldn't be normal, Patricia, to have that hesitation. Okay.
For sure. And I think with certainly my experience has been that oftentimes clients have a preconceived idea about who the financial person or who the lawyer is. Yeah. And so if you come about it in a way that it's not what they're expecting, it sort of takes the stress level down a bit.
Yeah. Yeah. And so be yourself. I mean, that's the thing. I mean, one of my big mantras right now is bring more of you to what you do. And I consistently have clients say they feel better leaving my office than when they arrived. And that's what I want. And so I'm hoping that you will all feel better leaving this webinar, because I'm checking out, than you did before you arrived. Because I do think that clients are showing up in your offices like they're showing up in mine, and they're saying, we don't want to get lawyers involved. And we need to be able to help those. And I'm always like, FYI, but they're like, yeah, we know. But so I think that if that's the kind of client you're attracting, that's a client who doesn't want a war and who wants something more than just the deal. Or else why would they put the effort into finding you? Okay, I really appreciate it. And I'm sorry I screwed up on the time. I'm going to go. But I'll leave the meeting, Linda. You can keep it going, and I welcome any of your inquiries. And I hope to see you all again someday soon.
Thank you, Jacinta.
Bye.
Yeah. Thanks a lot, Jacinta.
Thanks.
Go clean up your trees, Jacinta.
Thank you.
So for any of you that do want to stay for a few minutes, because usually we do have some questions. Are there questions that you'd like me to pose to Jacinta? Did you want to discuss this any further?
I'm okay personally, but it was an intriguing introduction to values and conflict. So yeah, it was interesting.
Great.
I think the repeat what Patricia basically said. Yeah, even though Jacinta said they don't consider it touchy-feely, but I guess I do. It is, getting into that mode. Especially, no offense intended, from somebody coming in to see a man as an accountant, as a financial specialist, and to start talking about feelings would probably be totally unexpected. And by the way, Jacinta and I we're both from Charlottetown, PEI, and I know Jacinta quite well. And I said to go clean up her trees. We just had Fiona, so we're all cleaning up trees. As Jacinta has said about her conversation before she meets anybody, I do the same thing. Probably a very different tone, but I explain how I operate, and I have them fill out a questionnaire before they come in, and it starts off the meeting on a nice level foot. They know what to expect, and instead of going through their feelings, I guess my approach is more. I'm going to tell you I'm going to tell you the facts of life, and if you don't like them, you can say so, and I'll explain why you're going to have to learn to live with the facts of life, especially if you end up in front of a judge. And it does work for me. One of my most interesting comments came from a client that I have in Grand Prairie, Alberta, who I dealt with probably 10 years ago, and he found me through your website, Linda, and because he was having trouble coming to an agreement, and so he called me up and told me he was paying $500 a month in child support, and then we talked for an hour actually on the phone, and he gave me some more details, and I said, I think you're probably going to end up paying $2,500 to $3,000 a month. You can imagine the silence and a little bit of the reaction. And somewhere along the way that he did hire me, and I was right. And he was taken a bit aback, but I said, look, this is where it's at. This is how much you make. You know, this is your obligation. And he tells me, I said, get over it. You know, you live with it because it's not going away. And I did an update for him 5 years ago. We touch base once a year as friends now more than anything. And he always says, you know, I'm giving advice to my staff. You know, has a pretty big company. He says, people come in, they're going through bankruptcy, through a divorce. And he says, you know, this fellow out east told me, you're going through a divorce, get over it. You know, you deal with it, get over it, move on. And he said, Blair, he said, you saved my life with that comment. You know, I was just totally changed person after. So there is some touchy-feely stuff in what we do. That's all I'm saying. But we got to get, as Jacinta has one approach, getting people on the right playing field so that they can negotiate. And I guess my approach is a little bit different, but we're all thinking in the back of our heads the touchy-feely stuff. It doesn't matter how we approach them. That's my ramble. I'll stop now.
Linda,
Yes.
This is my first live AFDS webinar. I'm just curious how it works. Do you automatically send out the CE PDF by email, or do we request that? Or
no, we will send it out. It isn't instantaneous though, because then we send away the webinar and that sort of thing for approval to get the credits. And then once we've got that back, which sometimes is timely and sometimes it's not. But anyways, once we do get it, we do send it out to people.
I see. Thank you.
Welcome. And I know Jacinta didn't talk about it too much, but for anybody who is leery about broaching those questions, she does have these workbooks that you can, it wasn't only for lawyers, but now they've opened it up because they've discovered that the lawyers are a little more reticent to give the workbooks out for the clients to go through and you know, think about their values and that sort of thing. Whereas the neutrals, being either financials or the family professionals, are seeing the value, and so it's you know, it's helping the lawyers inadvertently and obviously helping the clients. Anyone else have any questions or comments that they feel that they need to share about this topic? Or I mean, we could broach into anything else too if there's a burning question.
No, I'm good.
Okay. Well, basically, I guess if nobody else has any questions, then we'll close off and let you guys enjoy the rest of your day.
Well, thank you for hosting.
This was great. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks. Thanks very much. Bye, everybody.
Take care.
Hope things are good on the West Coast, Bettina.
Yeah.